Islamized and Christianized natives of this archipelago. Before we begin to our lesson proper, I'm gonna show you these photos of Vinta and Caracoa. Vintas are a small sailboat used only for short trips on days with normal sea breezes, while Caracoa, it is like a balamay but bigger. They can be used for both trade and war. However, their main use were as warships and troop transports during the traditional seasonal sea raids or piracy, especially against European trade ships. Among the Spanish missions was the 1578 military expedition in Mindanao, which aimed to have the Moro acknowledge Spanish dominion, establish trade with the Moro, and explore and exploit the natural resources of the land, end Moro piracy and raids against Spanish ships and Christianized settlements, and lastly, convert the Moro like the other Philippine groups. If the Luzon and Visayas were easily conquered by the Spaniards, it is not the case in Mindanao and Sulu. Since the Spaniards found the southern islands more difficult to subdue because the natives had already developed a socio-political organization called the Sultanate, which was actually an influence that came along with the Islamic faith. There were actually two major sultanates that existed and waged war against the Spanish colonizers. They were the Maguindanao Sultanate of the mainland Mindanao and the Sulu Sultanate of the Sulu archipelago. Although the Maranos of the Lake Lanao have had their own socio-political organization called the Pingampong Coranao. This, however, had very strict or limited contact with the Spaniards due to their remote location in the interior of Mindanao. In fact, there were two major moves on the part of the Spaniards that directly attempted to conquer the Maranos. One was during the time of Governor General Sebastian Hurtado de Cortella on 1639, and the other one was during the time of Governor General Valeriano Weyler on 1891. Each of these attempts ended in failure on the part of the Spaniards. Hence, the bulk of the action in the Spanish-Moro Wars would only involve the Maguindanao and Sulu Sultanate. Moving on, the wars that the Spaniards and the Moros fought were generally known among Filipino historians as Spanish-Moro Wars. However, the Spaniards referred to these wars as Guerras Piraticas, which literally means wars against pirates. By using the above description, the Spaniards concealed the real purpose and nature of their war against the independent sultanates of Maguindanao and Sulu. In other words, the wars of aggression that the Spaniards waged against the independent states of the South were projected by the colonizers as a justifiable and praiseworthy war. The Spanish-Moro were divided by historian Cesar Adib Mahol into 6 phases. It started during the arrival of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi in Visayas waters in 1565 until the last of the Spanish forces left the archipelago in 1898. Although at times, truce and peace treaties were forged by the Spaniards and the Moros, violence in general characterized Spanish-Moro relations. In the first phase, it was noted that the Spanish claim of sovereignty over the Philippine Islands was based on Magellan's discovery of the archipelago in 1521. However, such claim of sovereignty would remain meaningless unless and until some concrete show of Spanish power is demonstrated. After all, the rule of the time was might makes right, meaning one has the right over something if one is powerful and mighty enough to control that something. Controlling something, however, entails first and foremost the elimination of possible rivals. This is the reason why the first round of Spanish Moro was aimed at eliminating the supposed rival of Spain over the Philippines. Emphasis must be made that even prior to the coming of the Spaniards, this small but influential sultanate in Borneo had been having economic and political influence over many communities in the archipelago. In fact, Raja Sulaiman, the ruler of Manila at the time of Legazpi's arrival, was related by blood to the Sultan of Brunei, and that the Borneans used to freely come in and out of the country either to engage in trade, collect tribute, or preach Islam. With the Borneans around, Spanish pretensions of sovereignty over the Philippines could not simply make sense. Thus, as early as Legazpi's arrival in 1565, the Spaniards tried to demonstrate their seriousness by capturing a Bornean trading vessel in the vicinity of Bohol. 4 years later, in 1569, the Spaniards again engaged 20 vessels owned by the Borneans and Sulu Moros, capturing 4 of the vessels and their crew, and divided the loot among themselves. In 1578, the Spaniards decided to directly interfere in a dynastic dispute in Brunei, which culminated in the Spanish invasion of 1578. All these acts were done to intimidate and discourage Brunei from appearing and making her presence felt again in the Philippines. Indeed, the intimidation and show of force was so successful that after the Spanish invasion of 1578, Brunei would generally detach herself from Philippine affairs.
Now let us proceed to the second phase of war, dating back during 1578 to 1597. So this was the next step of the Spaniards. So during this phase, they have established forts and it, at the middle of the Moro territories. So after the disappearance of the Borneans in the Philippines, the Spaniards, the colonizers, then established numerous forts and colonies across the countries. So they even made some Moros pay tributes in the areas they successfully conquered, and one of their forts was established in the middle of Moro territories. So at first, they have targeted Sulu and then and the whole Mindanao in an attempt to establish a base which they could use for potential conquest. So, in order to claim the Spice Island, so they were still after the spices uh, uh, found in our country. So, uh, although Raha Ilo, there was this Raha Ilo of Sulu resisted the invasion of the Spaniards, he was captured before he managed to reach his quota. So it was Captain Esteban Rodriguez de Figueroa who led this invasion. Let's see. Yeah, he was the one who initiated the attack of these lands, but eventually, he was then killed in an ambush by the Moros. So, Captain Figueroa was uh, dead, was found dead, um, and his cause of death was he was struck at the head in Kampilan. Uh, it's how he died, and although despite Captain Figueroa's death, they were able to build. The Spaniards were able to build fonts in Tampakan. Uh, But due to the lack of supplies and communication, they were forced to retreat in a fort in La Caldera, Zamboanga. However, they were eventually driven away by the Moros' continuous attacks. So, during this second phase, no, the Moros tried to um, ask help from other ternates, but there were no available help that uh, walang help na dumating. So by the way, Tampakan is uh, somewhere midway of Mindanao and ba ano Basilan Sultanates, if I'm not uh, mistaken. And next, and yan, eventually nga, Spaniards left Tampakan due to lack of supplies. And then they retreated at Zamboanga. The third phase of the war, dating back in 1599 to 1600, uh, Moros realized that Spaniards aren't invincible. So they were able to drive out Spanish colonizers. So during this phase, retaliation raids at there were ano yun, retaliation raids in the territories of Luzon and Visayas. Um, Actually, Moros were able to compete with paying tributes of the Spaniards. And as Peter Going described this phase, it was a a phase characterized by quote unquote counter attacks. So during this phase, Moros made significant blows by intimidating natives that were utilized by the Spanish colonizers. So hindi lang nila, they were not only reclaiming the lands, so they also made an impact to the surrounding uh, communities. So sultanates also asked aid from Ternatans, Makassars, Borneans, and the Dutch. Okay. During the fourth to sixth phase, wala na siya date na kabutang mo. But it was the last phase, and during this phase, the Spaniards became furious kasi they were losing their ground. They in turn they were increasing their attacks. So in in defense of the Moros, they also strengthened their defenses. They also intensified their raids to counter the increasing attacks of the Spaniard colonizers. It was actually characterized by violent attacks, counterattacks, chaos, destruction, etc. So it was the most madugo na phase during their war. Uh, like for example, Magindanao's attack Visayas and Spanish attacks Sulu. There were even confusion during this phase of war kasi there were uh, there were confusion on between pirate attacks and professional I mean official attacks from the sultans kasi uh, they were in a not they were not able to distinguish the attacks from the professional pirates from Quran. around northeast of Borneo. So uh, it was given na constant ilahang pagpamirata that area by the Camocones, and those attacks were naglibog ang Spaniards if it was made by the pirates or actually made by the um, ordered by the sultans. So this confusing war, phase of war, was persisted until American colonizers in uh, 1898.
For question number 3, which moral leaders or personalities figured prominently during these wars? So during the Spanish Moro Wars, some personalities were figured prominently. Prominently means has an important role. So some Luzon and Visayas leaders were venerated as heroes like Diego Silang, Francisco Dagohoy, Magalat, Juan de la Cruz Palaris, and many more. However, datos like Dato Sirungan, Dato Buisan, Raha Bungsu, Dato Amay Pakpak were never considered as heroes even though they fought the Spaniards colonizers too, even more impressive than the Luzon and Visayas leaders that I've mentioned. So, first, who is Dato Sirungan? So Dato Sirungan was the Raha of Buayan. He was described as kind as he treated his prisoners well, including the Jesuit priest Melchor Hurtado. So Hurtado, who knew the Dato and lived among the Magindanaos for a year in 1603, described him as someone who knew Islamic law, avoided the wine and pork, and did not force the Visayan Christians living in his realm to embrace Islam. According to Hurtado, Sirungan was bitten by a poisonous centipede while performing his vain worship. He continued his prayers and suffered in silence. After he finished his prayer, he put his hands inside his clothes and said, I considered it lack of reverence to scratch oneself while speaking to God. Although Dato Sirungan was described as kind person, he still fought the Spaniards. He attacked the Spaniards who controlled Panay, Negros, and Cebu with 50 vessels and 3,000 warriors. He carried back 18,000 Visayan captives, which, based to, to Hurtado, embraced Islam without being forced. So is the next one is Dato Buisan. He attacked the town of Dulag Leyte, captured several inhabitants, forced the Waray Datus to conclude a blood compact with him, and exhorted them to fight the Spaniards with Magindanaos. According to Dalla Costa, the Leyte Datus were waiting for him. Buisan told them to be open-minded and consider the advantage from being a tributary to the Spaniards. So basically, the goal of Dato Bisan was to make them be an ally with the Magindanaos and fight off the Spaniards. After the speech of Bisan, they entered into a blood compact. So gislash nila ilang wrist, then gipatulo ila dugo sa bowl of brandy, then giinom. So the importance of blood compact between the datos of Leyte and Busan was to evoke the feeling of belongingness sa duha ka religion, which is ang Islam ug ang Christian. So, Dato Busan also mentioned na um, nag-regret siya sa raid na iyang gibuhat. So, pero the Spaniards were getting their manpower from Christianized communities from Luzon and Visayas to fight the Moros. Therefore, he raided the town of Leyte to weaken the Spaniards. Dr. Jose Rizal also recognized that the raid was necessary in order to preserve their independence.
Another gallant Moro leader who figured prominently during the Spanish Moro Wars was the Solo Sultan Rahabungso. He was known for having a noble character and knowledgeable in the affairs of the state. Kitabs, or also known as local Solo, mentioned that he had fought against the white men on land and sea. Spanish sources say he is held responsible for attacking the Spanish shipyards in Camarines. He has departed with 300 captives, including a Spanish lady named Doña Lucia. He became very fond with the Spanish lady, so that when she is returned to the Spaniards, the Sulu Sultan never asked for a ransom, which was a deviation from the usual practice. The measure of a ruler's greatness is his subjects' affection for him, and here Rahabungso stands very high. The Maranaos too produced a brave leader during the Spanish-Moro Wars, and he was in the person of Dato Amay Pakpak. He offered a gallant resistance to the Governor-General Valeriano Weyler. He frustrated Weyler's ambition to colonize Lake Lanao region when he fortified Marawi and resisted the colonization efforts of the Spaniards there. He did succeed in pursuing the Spanish forces to return to their bases in North Lanao. But in the second expedition in 1895, that was headed by Governor General Blanco, that made Pakpak Fort fell despite additional defenses. The brave Dato, his son, and 23 other Datos and 150 other Maranaos fell defending their quota on the 10th of March 1895 in Marawi, or also known as Marawi City in the present. Finally, this specific leader, a town and an entire province, was named after this leader. His name is Sultan Kudarat. Just like his father Dato Buisan, he fought against Spaniards and considered as the greatest of the Maguindanaoan leaders who fought the Spaniards and brought peace to almost all of South and Central Mindanao for almost half a century through a peace treaty. It kept the colonizers out of his dominion, which at the height of his power ranged from the Davao Gulf to parts of Lanao and Iliana Bay to the Zamboanga Peninsula and the island of Basilan. He was also known for his intelligence, tactfulness, and gallantry. But in the year 1637, Governor General Sebastian Hurtado de Corsera launched an attack against him. This led to Sultan Kudarat to be captured and wounded. Fortunately, he did escape this capture, but unfortunately, his wife, who was with their child, jumped off the cliff to avoid the said capture. For an ordinary person, such incident could break one's heart, but the Sultan proved to be chivalrous, because in the year 1639, he managed to ambush an attacking force, captured the Spanish Marines alive, treated the wounded among them, and then released them as a sign of his goodwill after entering a peace treaty with the Spaniards. He was known for his very patriotic speech, which is, "What have you done? Do you realize what subjection would reduce you to? A toilsome slavery under the Spaniards. Turn your eyes to the subject nations, and look at the misery to which such glorious nations had been reduced. Look at the Tagalogs and the Visayans. Do you think that the Spaniards would have considered you of the better stuff? Have you not seen how the Spaniards have trampled them under their feet? Do you not see how they are obliged to work at the oars and at the factories every day with all their might and rigors? Can you tolerate anyone with little Spanish blood to beat you up and grasp the fruit of your labor? Allow yourself today and tomorrow. You will be at the oars. I, at least, will be the pilot, captain of the ship. Do not let their sweet words deceive you. Their promises facilitate their deceits, which little by little will enable them to control everything. Reflect on how they dishonored even the minor promises they made to the heads of the other countries until they had become masters of them all. See now what is being done to these heads and how they are being led by a rod." End of speech. It took about 300 years to pass before due recognition and honors were given to this very great and most valiant Muslim leader, Sultan Muhammad Dipatuan Kudarat. And that ends our report. Thank you for listening.